Hello, and on behalf of all the faculty in the College of Business, I'd like to thank you for choosing Limestone University and welcome you to BA310 Ethics in the Workplace. My name is Michael Scharf and I am one of the professors in the business department. However, this is one of the more popular classes and likely I am not the professor in your section of the class. Therefore, if you have any questions about the content in any of these videos, please contact your professor in your class. I would like to highlight as we begin this kind of lecturette series that these are really short lectures about some of the more difficult topics within each chapter. And they should not be used as a replacement for either reading the chapter or checking out the PowerPoints. As a matter of fact, what I would recommend everybody do is read the chapter first and then either print off the PowerPoint slides or kind of have them up next to the video, and that would allow you to take notes on some of the more, the tougher topics in each chapter. But you can play it by ear and do whatever you'd like. So in this video, we're really going to introduce some of the concepts in Chapter 1. And Chapter 1 is called The Nature of Morality. And one of the big questions at the beginning of the chapter is there really a difference between ethics, everyday ethics, ethics that you use at home, and business ethics, since we have this whole class really on business ethics? And I guess really you could pause the video and think of that question. Do you think that there is a difference between ethics in any other situation and business ethics? And now that you've had really a chance to think about that, I will give you my opinion on it. And while many students think that there is a difference between the two, and that, I don't know, that we would allow more things to be considered ethical in a business context, I really hold that there is no difference. That lying in business we would think is unethical. Cheating in business we all think is unethical, just like we would in any other situation. And really I think what we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of the term is really ethics in a business context. That really the ethics, again in my opinion, stay the same regardless of the situation. Whether you're in a business context, in a family context, wherever it is, that what we would consider to be ethical is ethical in a business context, and what we would consider to be unethical is also unethical in a business context. So one of the next things that the chapter really focuses on is who gets to decide in business whether something is ethical or unethical. And when I ask classes this, many times it comes down to either I get to decide, which is a unique concept, that I get to decide what I do is ethical or not. Many times it's the CEO gets to decide, and while for small things that's probably true that the CEO does get to decide what is ethical and unethical inside the company, that really isn't true. I mean, we've seen many CEOs and presidents of companies go to jail over doing something unethical, and the crazy thing is all of them kind of pled not guilty and had some rationale and didn't think what they did was wrong. So really in a larger context, it's not even the CEO, and it's a much broader community, and we call in business we call that community stakeholders. And stakeholders include stockholders, which are the owners of the company or owners of the company, employees, which do include the CEO and other management and things like that, customers, the community, the legal system, and any other special interest group. So, for example, the stakeholders in Limestone University are the alumni, which from a business perspective are as close as we come to owners, employees, me included, customers, which we call students in the university context, the community, the Gaffney community, or some of the other communities that we happen to be in, the legal system, and then there might be other interest groups that are interested in athletics, or something else. I think one of the interesting things about this class are that we will find that people have very different opinions of what is ethical and what is not. I think in general we all think that people would think the same way that we do, and something that we think is unethical, everyone in the class or everyone in the company or wherever you happen to be would think the same way. And I think one of the things that we'll find in this class throughout the term are people think very differently about what they consider ethical and what they consider unethical. And these will be highlighted at the end of each chapter as we do some of these chapter case studies, and you will be able to read kind of what other people are thinking. And with that, the chapter really highlights this idea of bluffing in business. And there are people that actually think that bluffing or lying is part of the rules of the game of business. And therefore, there's nothing wrong with it if you know I'm going to lie to you, and I know I'm going to lie to you. It's kind of just the rules of the game, and there's nothing unethical about it. I think it's a little bit crazy that people actually think this, but people actually do. And they equate it, instead of saying lying, they equate it to, or they say it's bluffing, which more equates it to poker. And I think poker, bluffing, is within the rules of the game. And I don't think anybody who plays poker thinks that there's anything wrong with it. Nobody gets upset. Now, you might get upset because you lost, because somebody bluffed you and you lost the pot, but nobody thinks that's cheating. Whereas I do think in business, while we have this idea of buyer beware, caveat emptor, I don't think people think it's right and part of the game. But the interesting thing is that there are people that do. And one survey that went out said that 84% of business people said that they have been asked to do something unethical by their boss. So, I mean, to me, that's a crazy number that say that they've been asked to do something unethical. But really what it tells me is that this is not unusual, and you almost should be expecting it to happen, and you shouldn't be surprised when it does happen, because the vast majority of people say that it's happened to them. So going along those lines, I will say that one of the downsides of this course are that, in my opinion, the toughest chapters are the first 3 chapters. And that's really because we go over all the theories of ethics in the first 3 chapters. The good news is that after we get through the first few weeks of the class content becomes significantly easier for the remainder of the term, but we kind of got to get through the theories of ethics. Now, one of the cool things about the theories of ethics are that likely we use one of them. We use at least one of them as we go through. And what really the chapter does, or the content does, is put a real name to what you likely do in your head anyway, as far as considering whether to do something or not to do something, whether something's ethical or not ethical. So in chapter 1, it really introduces the very first theory that we're going to go over. And as we go over these, for each one of them, throughout the first 3 chapters, what you are asked to know is what the theory is, be able to apply it to a situation, and know the argument against that theory. Because there are arguments against every one of them. Whether you use it or not, there's an argument against it, and we all should know what that argument is. So the first one is ethical relativism, that is introduced in chapter 1. And ethical relativism is what is ethical, is what society or culture says is ethical. So if you're international and you've ever thought, who is the United States trying to tell our country what to do, or if you've ever just said that, who is the government to tell me what to do? That's really a relativist argument when you go back to really no country has a great history as far as treating all people well. So, but that's really a relativist argument to go along with what society says is right. Now, the argument against this is really there's nothing you can point to. There's no line in the sand that says this is unethical. Because if society is okay with it, then by definition it is ethical. So you go back to the early 1800s in the United States, and you would have to say that slavery is ethical. And I don't think that anybody can go online and say that slavery is ethical. So that's really the argument against using a relativist approach, is there is nothing you can point to that is unethical. So, as I said, one of the things that we all have to do is to be able to apply this to a situation. And what I give my classes are, I make them all second lieutenants in the Army. And to set this up, you are now a second lieutenant and a platoon leader in the Army, and you are in a foreign country. It really doesn't matter where. And you are on patrol out with your platoon. So a platoon is about 30 people, and you're in the Army, so we all have automatic weapons, grenades, and full firepower to do whatever you need to do. And as you're out there, you go walking by a small village, girl comes out, she's in a white dress, she's all tied up, and runs up to you and says, help me, they're making me marry the prince. And the real question is, what do you do in that situation? Do you say, hey, this is part of their culture, and send her back? Or do you help her? And what exactly do you do? What does help mean? So, the real question is, what do you do? And I would ask everybody to kind of pause the video at this point, and you can think about, A, do you send her back? Or B, if you don't send her back, what specifically are you willing to do? So go ahead and pause the video, think of what you would do, and restart the video. All right, so now that everybody has had an opportunity to think about what they do, I will say that when I do this exercise in class, the vast majority, probably over 90%, say send her back. That this is a cultural issue, it's not part of your mission, and go ahead and send her back. A minority of students have various different things that they would do. I will say the problem with helping her is, what specifically are you going to do? Are you going to take her and take her back with you? Well, that really creates an international incident, right? And my guess is your superiors are going to send her back anyway, but it creates an international issue, and likely you will suffer harm by inserting yourself in this international incident. That likely you will you will likely not get promoted, and that's probably the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is that, and probably a more likely scenario, is that you would be discharged from the Army, and there's at least a good chance that you would either have a general or less than honorable discharge. The bad news about that is it stays with you for life. That most surveys and things like that, job applications, they ask you if you've been in the military, and if so, what kind of discharge did you get? And since I think 85% of people get an honorable discharge, it puts you in the bottom 15%. Even though you did the right thing, because nobody asks that. So now the downside of sending her back is, yes, you did what was culturally acceptable, but again, what is going to happen to that girl? She's going to get raped. And so you almost have to be okay with that. And I get that most of us didn't think that was going to be the result of that. But that's kind of what you're doing, right? And that highlights both, I guess, what relativism is, as well as the downside of relativism, that you kind of have to be okay with that. That yes, and by the way, I think this is a true ethical dilemma where there's no good outcome here, and you suffer harm no matter, or people suffer harm no matter what happens. So this is really the first introduction to an ethical theory, and we will start on normative theories in chapter 2.